this is a real scramble for a new security architecture in Europe, as well as an attempt to put together a peacekeeping force. And, to some extent, Europe has itself to blame in this because this wasn't unforeseeable.
The American Secretary of State Marco Rubio is meeting the Russian foreign minister in Riyadh right now. I've just been looking at some pictures of it. It's in a sort of wood-panelled room. There's lots of flunkies and translators, white flowers on the table. All the pictures show them not quite talking to one another yet, so I'm sure they'll get round to it. But there's an awful lot of intermediaries, and you can imagine there's an awful lot of protocol in place. How far Rubio and Lavrov can actually go on this is an interesting question. How much are they allowed to start settling things like Ukrainian sovereignty is not clear either. The outcome of the overall process is likely to change the war in Ukraine. It could end the war in Ukraine. It could change an awful lot more than that when it comes to how the world looks. Catherine Philp is the Times World Affairs editor. She's currently in Kiev, which is quite a good place to be watching what is going on in Riyadh. Catherine, morning to you.
Good morning, Stig.
How does it feel watching it from Kiev? I mean, is it extraordinary, I suppose, for Ukrainians that their fate is going to be handed down to them, at least it looks like that way, from these two superpowers?
That's exactly how it feels to them here. And I think the scene you've just described of them meeting in that room really crystallizes it. That is all their fears about being the small and weak party in this that has to take the agreements made over its head are really crystallized in those images we're seeing.
You've been writing about this all week, the mineral wealth of Ukraine. There's been some information out today about what Trump wants from this, and this feeling that, I don't know if you sense this, Catherine, that Trump regards Ukraine as a defeated country and kind of wants a sort of Versailles Part 2, where America, having supported the Ukrainians, wants an awful lot of money back and effectively regards Ukraine as the vanquished country, Russia as the still strong country, and therefore wants its pound of flesh from Ukraine. Is there any feeling of that in Kyiv at the minute?
There's a profound feeling of that. I mean, I think your analogy, comparison to Versailles is spot on. But of course, the country we're talking about there was Germany, and Germany was the aggressor in that war. Ukraine is the invaded party, not only, potentially the vanquished ones, one in the eyes of Donald Trump. This deal was originally proposed by Zelensky himself, and it was intended as sort of bait to pull in Donald Trump and make him think that there was something in it for him. In a sense, that was seen to be quite a canny move on the part of Ukraine and a great understanding about what motivates Donald Trump. But the final document that was put to Zelensky and that he had previously hoped he would sign in Munich turned out to be so exploitative as to amount to extortion. It was asking also, most importantly of all, it was asking for vast access to Ukraine's mineral resources, not for future security guarantees from the US, but payback for what has already been given. So there was no guarantee contained within it about Ukraine's future security should it do a deal. And that ultimately was the entire point of the deal in the first place, or the offer coming from Ukraine.
Is there something implicit, I suppose, that Trump would say the implicit point is that if America has skin in the game in Ukraine, Russia won't invade it further? So if there is a US-Ukrainian mineral gathering operation, Russia's not going to compromise that because it doesn't want to take on the US. So he's offering him, this is sort of gangster mentality, really, that this is protection. This is a racket. If you come in with us, we'll protect you from the other bad guys.
Yes, absolutely. That's why I called it extortion. It's not offering protection. That's the problem. It's offering the notion that an American civilian presence in the form of contractors, commercial operators performing this mining and overseeing these mining concessions might hold off a future Russian invasion or deter Russia from doing that. Well, I've spoken to people who've deeply involved in this, geological experts and the like in Kiev, they've pointed out that no commercial operator would go into such an insecure environment anyway, where if that were a potential outcome, and that we're talking about something that would take years and years to yield any profits. It's not clear who on earth would actually take on the burden of extracting these minerals, and indeed whether that would have any deterrence on Russia.
Keir Starmer's plan is to gather together the people of the nations of Europe to provide an armed force. That's not gone brilliantly because Poland doesn't want to do it, Germany doesn't want to do it, Spain doesn't want to do it, nor does Italy. But his other point is to come to Washington next week and say, can you give a backstop to whatever Europe gets together to guarantee Ukraine? There's a risk that won't happen, I suppose.
I don't see it happening, not from the mood music that we've seen coming out of the White House thus far. I mean, one of those backstops could also come in the form of air cover. But again, we've had no indication that Trump is willing to do that. I think the case of Germany is interesting because, of course, there's about to be an election there. So, what Olaf Scholz has to say about troops may not be what his successor is going to say, because it looks very likely he'll be kicked out of office in a week. On the part of countries like Poland and the Baltic states, who have got the high spending and the high troop ratio to population, they have a very valid point in that they need to protect their own borders against future Russian aggression, which it now looks highly unlikely that the US would deter from happening if it happened to them. This is a real scramble for a new security architecture in Europe, as well as an attempt to put together a peacekeeping force. And, to some extent, Europe has itself to blame in this, because this wasn't unforeseeable.
No.
It has been clear for well over a year that Trump could return to power, and I think there's been an awful lot of wishful thinking going on that things would not come to what they have come to.
Yeah, it's a very good point, Catherine. It'd be interesting to see how the mood changes in Kiev over the next couple of days as the information about these talks comes out. Catherine, great to speak to you. Thank you for joining us. That's Catherine Philp there, the Times World Affairs editor, currently in Kiev, which is an interesting place to be watching all of this. I'm very struck by the fact that there's going to be a centre-right government in Germany, probably. It might have to do a deal with the AfD, which is a far-right group in Germany. The far-right or the right are not that pro-interventionist in war. They're weirdly pro-Russia, generally speaking. We see this a bit with Reform. The right-wing party in this country, they're not anywhere talking about supporting Ukraine. They're not really anywhere about saying anything other than we don't want a war with Russia.
Yeah, I wonder if we'll hear from Nigel Farage later on today or tomorrow, potentially. Somebody messaged in earlier saying, where is he? He's not on the airwaves, and we usually hear from him. And it is a good point. Reform have been pretty quiet over the last couple of days.